Hi, friends. I'm Scott Giles, and I'm a life coach and a certified consulting hypnotist. Every Saturday afternoon at 2:30 Central Time, I do a 5 or 10 minute video on some aspect of life coaching or the hypnotic arts and sciences. Today, I want to talk a little more theoretically about what we call the body mind heart connection. Now, a lot of people who are involved in complementary or alternative healing modalities, and hypnosis can be one of those, will often talk about the mind body connection, that the mind can influence the body can influence the mind. There's no question about this. Just imagine yourself holding a lemon in your hand, make it really vivid. Smell the scent of the lemon, and then imagine yourself taking a big bite out of the lemon and chewing it, and you're finding that your mouth is salivating. That simple idea in the mind has caused a physical change in the body. Uh, Many demonstrations like this are quite possible. But the connection isn't that simple. There is a third player besides the body and the mind, and that's the heart itself. Now, I've long been interested in cardiac matters, in part because I'm a cardiac patient myself. In cardiac matters, your mind can be your friend or your worst enemy, depending on how you learn to use your mind and how you discipline yourself to use your mind. There is actually a condition that's now recognized called stress related cardiomyopathy, also called the broken heart syndrome. An extremely negative emotional reaction to something that has occurred can actually so stress the heart it impinges upon the heart's ability to function. And you can actually die from stress related cardiomyopathy. Stress doesn't do your heart any good under the best of circumstances. It causes you to go into a flight or fight syndrome, which in ancient times prepared you to run away from the saber-toothed tiger or to stay and fight the saber-toothed tiger. But what it does is it redlines your cardiovascular system. And if there's any weakness in the plumbing, that's when it's going to blow out. Also, it causes your platelets in your bloodstream to stick together, forming clumps that can get caught and produce a heart attack or a stroke. But apart from that physiological problem, stress related cardiomyopathy is even beyond that. It's actually a neurological matter. And we're seeing increasingly adult sudden death syndrome, death by overwork or death by stress. Your heart functions through your autonomic nervous system, one of the two nervous systems you have in your body. That system has two branches: sympathetic, controlling activation, parasympathetic, controlling release. So when your heart contracts, that's the activation of the sympathetic system. When your heart dilates, that's the activation of the parasympathetic system. They need to be in reasonable synchronization, not 100%, but reasonable balance. Stress can cause them to get so badly out of sync, the heart stops. And unless something intervenes to get it started again, either a medical electrical shock from a defibrillator or something like that, you're dead. Adult sudden death syndrome, and the autopsy will find nothing wrong with the body. So your mind and stress in your mind can be your slayer in cardiac matters, can also be your healer if you use your mind more properly to be able to produce the circumstances most prone to health. Depression. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, actually estimates that up to 65% of the people who have heart attacks actually also have experienced some form of depression. This causes stress in the body, just like any stress does, but also tends to predispose to a lack of self-care that also makes a cardiovascular event more likely. And the American Heart Association has done a lot of research in what they're coming to call Black Monday syndrome, which is that for younger people who have heart attacks, a lot of them have it in the first 2 hours of Monday morning. Mostly men, but increasingly women too, as women begin to occupy equal portions of the workforce. These are people getting ready to go off to jobs they hate, jobs that are killing them. And their subconscious mind decides, we don't have to do this. We could just die. And the heart stops, or the heart has a heart attack. So this is a big deal, the mind-body connection. And it definitely affects the heart more so than almost any other organ. Another interesting thing that the American Heart Association has demonstrated is that people with cardiac problems tend to engage in thoughts of hostility a lot. There's also studies that come out of Sweden that if you're hostile and you're sustaining that hostility, it prevents the heart from self-regulating. It stays at red line, more likely to blow out. Now, in the HeartMath Institute in California, which I am credentialed with, this is the body that does probably the best research, in my opinion, about the mind-body-heart interconnection. They actually have determined and produced a lot of high-quality research showing that the heart actually processes information independently of the brain and then sends that information in its processed form to the brain. So it's not a case that your consciousness is just located inside your cranium. Actually, your consciousness is distributed throughout your body in other organ systems as well. For example, the gut is often believed to be another center for the processing of information. People will tell me I trust my gut. And if you think about what your gut looks like, it actually does look like your brain with all the crenellations. The Chinese actually call the bowel the second brain. But quite apart from that, the heart also seems to process information. It gets the input from the brain, and that travels down the vagus nerve, which wires into the heart. Then the heart seems to do something with that information. And people will say in common language, my heart's broken. That I know in my heart that something is true. That is the intelligence of the heart manifesting itself. And once the heart has come to that conclusion, it processes that information and communicates it in a variety of ways. Through pressure. Your blood pressure goes up. By activity, tachycardia, when you can feel your heart beating a lot. Neurologically, it sends information throughout your body, but up that vagus nerve especially, and also electromagnetically. The heart actually produces a measurable electromagnetic field that you can measure up to a meter outside of the body. And in fact, the HeartMath Institute has shown that the electromagnetic field of your body is actually interacting with the electromagnetic field produced by the heart of other people in your environment. There's a good video on my website. If you check under helpful essays and take a look at heart-centered material, there's actually a video from HeartMath that shows how when you're in an intimate relationship, there's a synchronization that occurs between the electromagnetic field of your heart and other people. And HeartMath has actually done an experiment where it's monitored the cardiac rates of heart rate variation of 4 people. They're actually wearing a monitoring device. 3 people were calm, positive, as we say, coherent. Then we introduce a new person who's in an agitated state. Simply being in the presence of the 3 other people who are in the coherent, calm, optimistic state causes a measurable change in the electromagnetic state of the heart of the 4th person. So we're influencing each other all the time. Now, the heart wires into the brain up the vagus nerve to the medulla oblongata. That's a barrel-shaped part of the brain at the base of the brain stem where the spinal cord connects to the brain. That controls your autonomic nervous system, or that part of your brain controls your autonomic nervous system. And your autonomic nervous system controls everything that happens automatically: your respiration, your digestion, your healing, your immune response. And so your heart, when it reaches a conclusion about data that has come to it, communicates that conclusion to the part of your brain, the medulla oblongata, that controls the stuff which happens subconsciously. So the heart actually has a direct impact on your subconscious mind. So that's why those of us who are following the HeartMath research, will often in our hypnotic work reference the heart. There's a technique that I do a dozen times a day called quick coherence. I focus on my heart. When you focus on any part of your body, you're increasing local blood pressure. And the heart is the biggest oscillator in the human body. Some of you may remember from high school science classes the pendulum demonstration that the teacher probably did. If you have a series of pendulums swinging randomly, if you just group them together, even if they're not touching, within a period of time, they will all have synchronized their swing or the period of the pendulum. It's called the pendulum effect. Oscillating systems tend to unify their oscillations if grouped together over time. Well, the heart's the biggest oscillator in your body. And by focusing on it, you encourage all of the other systems in the body to come into synchronization with it, creating a coherent, mindful state. The second part of quick coherence is heart breathing. You add a little bit of imagination. Imagine you're breathing through your heart instead of through your lungs. It just makes the image more profound. And then finally, heart feeling. Recall some positive experience or appreciation, and don't just think about it, put yourself back there. I go back to something that happened to me in my junior year of college when I was sitting outside the art museum on the campus of the University of Connecticut on this brilliant October fall day with the trees still holding their leaves and the crisp fall air, and light has an unusual quality when it filters through the colored leaves. And I remember the smell of burning leaves. Back then you could burn leaves. And that was when I realized that I was going to do well in college. So more than a dozen times a day, every time I make a cup of tea or coffee, every time I touch the ignition switch of my car or use the bathroom, I take 30 seconds, eyes open, while on the go, and do a quick coherence technique. It's one of the reasons why I'm probably still alive, given the cardiovascular problems I have, because this puts my system back into a state of rest. It enlists my heart as my ally in the mind-body-heart connection. So it's something you may want to consider. If you're curious about the HeartMath Institute, the heartmath.com will get you the bookstore, and there's also HeartMath, I think it's .org for the Institute, which is a nonprofit. Go on to Amazon.com, search for HeartMath. There are many books that anyone can buy which explain the research and will make it more in more detail for you. But keep this in mind. It isn't just the heart, the mind-body connection. It's the mind-body-heart connection. And the heart is an important player. Hey, thank you very much for your time and attention this afternoon. I'll be back next week with another video. I'm going to talk then about deep learning. So if you're curious about how to learn in a more profound way, enlisting your unconscious as well as your conscious skills, please feel free to tune in. As always, if I can be helpful to you, please feel free to reach out to me through my website or by email or phone or whatever. And when I edit this, I'll put my website up. Also, we have a Patreon channel. Those of you who want to have a deeper engagement with my work and my ministry can subscribe on Patreon. There's only one tier. It's $5 a month. But there are videos that I put up there that are only for my patrons. And these are much more personal. Some of them are spiritual or theological, and they are also more intimate in an appropriate way about who I am and how I live my life. Information that I wouldn't just put out there in the public domain. So my patrons can get that. Check it out if you're curious. Check out my website too. Thank you much. Be back next week. Bye-bye.